In one of my recent videos, I briefly talked about single player and the steady decline of it in the video game industry in general. In today's video, I want to go a little bit deeper into that and talk about what I meant regarding the Need for Speed series. So if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to go and drop a like and subscribe, and let's get straight into it. I think it is to the surprise of no one that there has been a slow decline in the amount of effort that has been put into single player in not just Need for Speed, but also in other racing games and other genres in the video game industry. Now, of course, each big company has not publicly come out and said that they have been intentionally stopping the creation of a lot of single player games, but I mean, if we're going to be real here, it does seem like the number of single player games, especially high profile or AAA releases, has decreased steadily over the years, especially as these major publishers invest more heavily in multiplayer and live service models so they can make the most amount of money possible. Times have changed, and there are always the people who say that back then they weren't charging for everything and the games didn't have microtransactions. Well, back then, games also were sold complete, right? It was a completely different business model, and companies actually sold every game with all the content that you could get. Today's games are designed with drip feed content in mind, meaning they make the full game and then release half of it to the players, and over time slowly release the rest of what they already made to extend the life of the game. Also, companies want a steady stream of income now until a game is in the dirt. That wasn't the dominant mindset back then. Keep in mind, this is just my opinion and my theory on how things will go down the road. Nothing has been confirmed by any of the devs or by EA themselves. Let me say that again for all the people in the back. There has been nothing to confirm these claims I am making. This is only what I think could possibly happen based on how companies work. All of this to say, I am a big believer that EA will eventually take the story / single player out of Need for Speed permanently. It may not be in the next game and probably won't be in the next game. But a few games down the line, I think EA will realize that with or without the single player, a group of people will buy the next Need for Speed regardless. And if that is enough to satisfy them, then why would they continue to put in the effort of making a whole separate single player part of the game? I understand that this would probably shake the Need for Speed world, and honestly, EA would have to balance something like this very carefully. Story modes in Need for Speed have always been a big part of its identity, and a lot of fans buy the game specifically for that single player experience. If they do cut it out completely, then that would risk separating a huge part of the player base. But we need to ask ourselves, is that single player base bigger and more influential than the base that plays multiplayer and lines EA's pockets? The second a company realizes that they don't have to continue putting in as much money, time, and effort into something for them to achieve the same results as before is when things tend to go downhill, right? A company, especially one as objectively greedy as EA is concerned about making the most amount of money as it can while spending as little time and effort as they can to achieve that. And it's not just EA, right? We have seen plenty of companies do this, and one of the biggest culprits is Activision and the Call of Duty franchise. Call of Duty used to be an amazing franchise that was a game changer every single time a game would drop. But over time, Activision realized that they could create a half-baked product and people would buy it regardless just because it was Call of Duty. So what happened? Features started to be removed, the game started to become even more rushed, the story modes aren't nearly as good and fleshed out, half the game isn't even available on release day. Those are the things I am talking about. Single player as it stands right now is what a lot of Need for Speed fans like about the games, and EA knows this 100%. But if there were to come a day where they release a new game with a multiplayer that would create enough revenue to keep the game floating above the red, I do propose they won't even think twice about ditching single player. A story mode in Need for Speed is a one and done experience, meaning once you beat it, there's really no financial incentive for the player to stick around majority of the time. Money is always the first concern when it comes to things like this, and a lot of people don't really get that. This isn't to say that the community doesn't matter, because it surely does, right? But things always come back to funding and revenue. Eventually, it gets to a point that companies will do what they want regardless, because as said before, they know they can get away with it due to the amount of consumers that will buy their game and keep them floating. Sure, people may not like how a future title in the Need for Speed franchise doesn't have a story, But you would be severely mistaken to think people still wouldn't buy the game, especially if it's available on current gen and old gen. Need for Speed is Need for Speed, and even the worst games have had people buy them throughout their entire life cycle. And then, even with how Unbound was run, right, things didn't start to get better until there was a way for EA to continue profiting outside of just game sales. The reason why we were able to get Kaizen and all of these other things was because of the paid Speed Pass and all of those extra paid features that they would add as time went on. So keep in mind, those transactions weren't even bad. EA added the paid Speed Pass into Need for Speed Unbound for the same reason they and other publishers out here are adding battle passes into almost every modern multiplayer or live service title. They want recurring revenue and player retention. Yes, I know a lot of you guys hated what they did with the premium Speed Pass and all of that, but it could have been way worse. All the cars could have been locked behind money. They could have locked additional tracks behind paywalls. It could have been a nightmare, regardless of how silly that may sound. Never think that they are too good and have enough morals to do that to y'all. If given the chance, meaning they know that they can get away with it for either the time being or permanently, they will do it. EA has done some very crazy stuff before that people never thought they would do trying to get money, like in Battlefront 2. So never put that past them. So yes, what you think does matter to an extent, but if you're not writing the checks for the bigwigs, then I can almost guarantee they do not care what people want 99% of the time. And as a reminder, this was all done for multiplayer, which is what they are catering towards anyway. Single player does not have the luxury of a lot of things multiplayer can provide. Let's break it down with money talk. From a business perspective, multiplayer games simply have more ways to generate ongoing revenue than single player games do. With single player, you can have DLC, which are one-time payments for additional content, right? That would be the main source of income, with maybe a few cars that they could add as additional smaller streams of revenue. But after that, it's pretty much dried up. Multiplayer games are designed to keep players engaged for months or even years. With that comes a bunch of microtransactions, new skins, maybe new cars, battle passes, expansions, seasonal updates, all that sort of jazz. Games that implement these things earn billions of dollars, not millions, billions of dollars. And half the time they're free to play. For example, you got Fortnite, Warzone, and Apex who are out here raking in a stupid amount of money every single year because players continue spending money to customize their characters or keep up with the new content. This is what EA wants in every single one of their games. From their perspective, removing or downplaying story mode frees up resources to focus on the part of the game that generates ongoing income. As said before, this is a pretty wild prediction for the series, but how it's looking right now, I think it could be done. But I will also say that if they don't remove it completely, I do not think we will be getting another fully fleshed out story ever again. It has been proven EA only caters towards Need for Speed when it is convenient for them to do so, and will take all resources and studios away from the franchise in an instant. EA's goal is to turn the franchise into more of a live service racing platform, a game that players return to over and over again because of the new cars, events, cosmetics, and the online stuff, right? The compromise I mentioned earlier, which was keeping barely a story in the game, fits into their strategy pretty well in my opinion. A short intro campaign could act like a tutorial before funneling everyone into the online multiplayer. But the days of having stories like Most Wanted and even Heat, I think honestly that is over, guys. Let me know what you guys think about all this down below in the comments, and if you enjoyed, make sure to go ahead and drop a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video.